The worst betrayal doesn't come from a stranger. It comes from the person who once promised never to leave. Emma Carter stood frozen in the center of the living room, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the rain tapping against the windows. Across from her, Ryan Carter didn't look guilty. He didn't look ashamed. If anything, he looked annoyed that she was still standing there. Beside him sat Sophia Blake, her designer handbag resting on the couch as if she already belonged in the house. Emma's eyes moved between them, searching for some sign that this was all a misunderstanding. A joke. A nightmare. Anything but reality. "Ryan," she whispered, "please tell me this isn't what it looks like." He let out a long sigh. "Emma, stop making this harder than it has to be." The words hit harder than she expected. 3 years of marriage. Countless promises. Endless sacrifices. Reduced to a sentence delivered with the emotion of canceling a dinner reservation. Emma instinctively placed a hand over her pregnant belly. 6 months. That was how far along she was. 6 months of dreaming about their future. 6 months of believing they were building a family together. Sophia crossed her legs and looked away, avoiding eye contact. That almost hurt more. Not because she felt remorse. Because she clearly didn't. "You're really doing this?" Emma asked. "Right now?" Ryan rubbed his forehead. "I should have ended this months ago." Her stomach dropped. Months ago. The words echoed in her mind. Months. While she had been attending doctor appointments alone. While she had been decorating a nursery. While she had been choosing baby names. He had already checked out of the marriage. "So everything was a lie?" she asked quietly. Ryan stood and grabbed a set of keys from the counter. "I'm tired of pretending." The room suddenly felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky. Emma realized she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her anymore. The man she married would have never spoken to her this way. The man she loved would have never looked at her like she was an inconvenience. Ryan walked toward the front door and opened it. Cold. Wind rushed inside. Rain splashed against the entryway floor. "You need to leave." Emma stared at him. For a second, she thought she had heard him wrong. "What?" "You heard me." Her eyes widened. "Ryan, it's pouring outside." "Then find somewhere else to go." A painful silence settled over the room. Emma looked at Sophia one last time. The woman remained silent. Not a single word. Not a single apology. Emma felt something inside her break. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet crack in the foundation of everything she once believed. Slowly, she picked up her purse. Tears blurred her vision. Then she stepped toward the open door. Rain immediately soaked her hair. The cold air stung her skin. Behind her, the door closed. Just like that. Alone. Pregnant. Homeless. Standing in the middle of a storm. But what Emma didn't know was that someone across the street had been watching everything. And the moment she stepped into the rain, that person finally decided to move. Rain poured from the sky in thick sheets as Emma walked down the empty street with no destination in mind. Water soaked through her clothes within seconds. Her shoes splashed through puddles that reflected the glow of distant streetlights. Every step felt heavier than the last. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to block the cold, but nothing could stop the chill spreading through her body. What hurt most was not the rain. It was the silence. No phone call. No message. No one checking if she was safe. The man she had trusted with her heart had erased her from his life in a single night. Emma stopped beneath a tree, though its branches offered almost no shelter. Her hands trembled as she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. The screen lit up. 3% battery remained. She stared at her contacts. Most of her friends had moved away years ago. Her parents had passed away before her wedding. Ryan had become her entire world. Now that world was gone. A lump formed in her throat. She lowered the phone without making a call. Across the street, hidden behind rain-covered windows, a black Rolls-Royce remained parked and still. Inside, a man sat quietly in the back seat. His sharp, blue eyes never left Emma. He had been watching for nearly 20 minutes. Not because of curiosity, because he recognized her. The driver glanced into the rearview mirror. "Sir, should we leave?" The man did not answer immediately. Instead, he continued watching the young woman standing alone beneath the storm. 10 years. 10 years of searching. 10 years of unanswered questions. 10 years of wondering whether he would ever find her again. Then, finally, he spoke. "No." Outside, Emma took another shaky breath and started walking. The rain grew heavier. Thunder echoed through the city. Her vision blurred. Exhaustion settled into her bones. She had barely slept in days. The stress of her failing marriage had drained every ounce of strength she had left. Suddenly, a sharp pain tightened across her abdomen. Not severe, just enough to make her stop. Fear flashed through her chest. Instinctively, her hand moved to her stomach. "Please," she whispered. "Not now." She closed her eyes and waited. After a few moments, the discomfort faded. Relief washed over her. Still, tears slipped down her cheeks. She felt completely alone. Then headlights appeared beside her. A luxury car rolled smoothly to the curb. Emma frowned. The vehicle looked expensive enough to belong in a movie. The rear door opened. For a second, nobody stepped out. Then a tall man emerged from the shadows. His dark coat moved slightly in the wind. Rain struck his shoulders, but he seemed completely unaffected by the weather. Emma took a cautious step backward. The stranger stopped several feet away, giving her space. His expression was calm, controlled, yet there was something unusual in his eyes, something that looked almost like relief. The man studied her face for a long moment before speaking. When he finally did, his voice was low and steady. "Emma Carter." Her heart skipped. She stared at him in confusion. "How do you know my name?" The stranger looked at her as if he had been waiting years to answer that question. Then he said the words that changed everything. "Because I have been looking for you for a very long time." Emma stared at the stranger as rain continued falling around them. For a moment, she wondered if she had heard him correctly. Her heart was already racing from everything that had happened that night. Now a man she had never seen before was standing in front of her, claiming he had spent years searching for her. "I think you have the wrong person," she said quietly. The man shook his head. "No, I do not." His certainty made her even more uneasy. He looked to be in his late 30s. Tall, well-dressed, calm in a way that suggested he was used to being in control of every situation around him. Yet despite his composed appearance, there was something deeper in his eyes. Something personal. Something almost emotional. Emma took another careful step back. "Who are you?" The stranger glanced toward the waiting Rolls-Royce before returning his attention to her. "My name is Alexander Reed." Even through her confusion, the name sounded familiar. Then it clicked. Alexander Reed, the billionaire businessman whose face appeared regularly in financial magazines and national news interviews. The founder of one of the largest technology companies in the country. Emma blinked in disbelief. "Alexander Reed?" she repeated. "The Alexander Reed?" A faint smile touched his face. "Unfortunately, yes. Under different circumstances, she might have laughed. Instead, she stood frozen in the rain, trying to understand why one of the wealthiest men in America was standing on a sidewalk talking to her. "Why were you looking for me?" she asked. Alexander's expression softened slightly. "Because 10 years ago, you changed my life." Emma frowned. "That is impossible. I have never met you." "You met me," he replied. "You just do not remember." Before she could ask another question, another wave of discomfort passed through her abdomen. This time Alexander noticed immediately. Concern flashed across his face. "Are you all right?" Emma nodded quickly, even though she was not entirely sure. She was exhausted, soaked, emotionally drained. More than anything, she wanted the night to end. Alexander looked toward his driver. "Bring an umbrella." Seconds later, a large black umbrella appeared above them, shielding Emma from the rain for the first time in nearly an hour. The simple gesture nearly brought tears to her eyes. Not because it was extraordinary, because after everything that had happened, somebody was finally showing kindness. Alexander removed his coat and held it out. Emma hesitated. "You do not have to do that. You are freezing." She looked down at her trembling hands. He was right. Slowly, she accepted the coat. It felt warm, safe. For reasons she could not explain, some of the fear inside her began to ease. Alexander studied her carefully. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" The silence that followed gave him his answer. Emma lowered her eyes. She could not bring herself to admit the truth aloud. Alexander nodded once. "Come with me." Her head lifted immediately. "What?" "I have a guest house. You can stay there until you decide what you want to do next." Emma stared at him. Every instinct told her to be cautious. Yet another part of her recognized that she had no options left. Then Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photograph protected inside a worn plastic sleeve. He handed it to her. Emma looked down. Her breath caught instantly. The picture showed a teenage girl standing beside a frightened young man outside a small bus station. The girl was unmistakably her, and the young man beside her was Alexander. Suddenly, the memories began rushing back. Emma could barely breathe as she stared at the photograph. The image was faded around the edges, but there was no mistake. The smiling teenage girl in the picture was her. A distant memory slowly emerged from the corners of her mind. 10 years earlier, she had been 17 years old, working part-time after school near a small bus station outside Chicago. One rainy evening, she had noticed a young man sitting alone on a bench. He looked exhausted, worried, completely lost. She remembered buying him a cup of coffee with money she could barely afford to spend. They had talked for less than an hour. He never told her much about himself. Before leaving, she had given him a simple piece of advice. Do not give up on your future just because today feels impossible. Emma blinked. She looked up at Alexander. That was you. For the first time since she had met him, his guarded expression softened completely. Yes. She stared at him in disbelief. I only spoke to you for a few minutes. Those few minutes changed everything. Rain continued falling around them, but Emma barely noticed anymore. Alexander carefully took the photograph back. At that point in my life, I had lost almost everything. My father had passed away. The company was failing. I was ready to walk away from all of it. His gaze drifted briefly into the distance. Then a teenager sat beside a stranger and reminded him that one bad chapter was not the end of the story. Emma felt a strange mix of emotions. Surprise, confusion, disbelief. She had completely forgotten that encounter. To her, it had been a small act of kindness. To him, it had become something much larger. I never expected to see you again, Alexander said quietly. But I never forgot you. The words hung in the air between them. Not romantic, not dramatic, just honest. Emma looked away, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Less than 2 hours earlier, she had lost her home, her marriage, and the future she thought she was building. Now she was standing beside one of the most powerful men in the country, learning that a forgotten moment from her past had somehow shaped his life. It felt unreal. Alexander opened the rear passenger door of the Rolls-Royce. You need rest. Emma hesitated. Every lesson she had ever learned told her not to get into a car with a stranger. Yet Alexander no longer felt like a stranger. Not entirely. More importantly, she had nowhere else to go. Slowly, she stepped inside. The warm air immediately wrapped around her. She closed her eyes for a moment as relief spread through her exhausted body. The door closed gently behind her. Minutes later, the car moved through the rain-covered streets. Neither of them spoke much during the drive. Emma watched city lights blur past the windows while her thoughts raced. Eventually, the vehicle turned through large iron gates and entered a private estate. Her eyes widened. The property looked less like a home and more like a luxury resort. A long driveway curved toward an elegant mansion illuminated by soft golden lights. The car stopped beneath a covered entrance. Before Emma could gather her thoughts, a woman in her 50s stepped outside carrying an umbrella. She smiled warmly. Welcome home, Miss Carter. Emma froze. Home. Nobody had called any place home for her all night. Then Alexander said something that left her even more stunned. Prepare the East guest house, he instructed, and call Dr. Bennett. I want Emma examined tonight. Emma turned toward him. Why would you do all this for me? Alexander met her eyes. His answer came without hesitation. Because this time, when you needed help, I was not going to be too late. Emma had forgotten what safety felt like. That realization hit her the moment she stepped inside the guest house. Warm light filled the spacious rooms. A fireplace crackled softly in the corner. Fresh towels waited on a nearby chair. Everything felt calm, almost unreal compared to the storm she had left behind. For several seconds, she simply stood there, unable to move. Her entire life had changed in a single evening. A house manager named Margaret guided her upstairs with a gentle smile. Dr. Bennett will arrive shortly. In the meantime, please make yourself comfortable. Emma nodded. Thank you. After a hot shower and a change into clean clothes provided by the staff, she finally sat down on the edge of a large bed. The silence around her felt strange, peaceful, yet her mind refused to rest. Images from earlier kept replaying. Ryan's cold expression. Sophia sitting comfortably in the home Emma had helped build. The sound of the front door closing behind her. Tears filled her eyes again. She quickly wiped them away. She was tired of crying. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Minutes later, Dr. Bennett entered the room carrying a medical bag. She appeared kind and professional. The examination was brief but thorough. When it was over, the doctor smiled reassuringly. Both you and the baby are doing well. Emma released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Relief washed through her entire body. Thank you. You have been under a lot of stress, the doctor continued. Right now, rest is one of the most important things you can give yourself. After she left, Emma found herself standing near the window. The rain had finally begun to slow. Across the estate grounds, she noticed lights glowing from the main mansion. One window remained illuminated on the second floor. For some reason, she suspected Alexander was still awake. Meanwhile, her suspicion was correct. Alexander sat alone in his study, staring at an old photograph resting on his desk. The same photograph he had shown Emma earlier. His trusted assistant, Daniel Brooks, entered quietly. You found her. Alexander nodded. Daniel looked genuinely surprised. After 10 years. After 10 years, Alexander agreed. Daniel sat across from him. Does she know everything? Alexander's gaze remained fixed on the photograph. Not yet. Daniel hesitated. Will you tell her? A long silence followed. Eventually, there was more to the story than Emma realized. Much more. Alexander had spent years searching for the young woman who had unknowingly changed his life. Yet what he had not told her was that finding her had become more than a simple search. It had become a promise, one he had refused to abandon. Back in the guest house, Emma finally climbed beneath the blankets. Exhaustion settled over her like a heavy weight. For the first time in months, she felt protected. Not by money, not by luxury, by kindness. As she drifted toward sleep, her phone suddenly lit up on the nightstand. One new message appeared on the screen. Her heart tightened the moment she saw the sender's name. Ryan. Her finger hovered over the notification. After everything that had happened, she almost ignored it. Almost. Slowly, she opened the message. The color immediately drained from her face. There was only one sentence. One sentence that changed everything she thought she knew. Emma, Sophia just told me something about the baby, and we need to talk immediately. Emma stared at the message for several long seconds. Her pulse quickened. Earlier that night, Ryan had made it painfully clear that he wanted nothing to do with her. Now he suddenly claimed there was something important about the baby. The contradiction made her uneasy. Slowly, she sat down on the edge of the bed and read the message again. Nothing changed. The same words remained on the screen. Emma, Sophia just told me something about the baby, and we need to talk immediately. Her first instinct was to ignore him. After everything he had done, he no longer deserved her attention. Yet curiosity lingered. What could Sophia possibly have told him? Before she could decide, another message appeared. Please answer. This is important. Emma closed her eyes. For months, she had been the one begging Ryan to communicate. Now the situation had reversed. A bitter sadness settled inside her. She locked the phone and placed it face down on the nightstand. Tonight she needed rest, not more confusion. Across town, Ryan paced nervously through the living room. The confidence he had shown earlier was gone. Sophia sat on the couch watching him with growing irritation. Stop walking in circles, she said. Ryan ignored her. Something about their conversation earlier kept replaying in his mind. At first he had dismissed it. Then the more he thought about it, the more uncomfortable he became. He grabbed his phone and checked it again. No response from Emma. Meanwhile, at the estate, sleep refused to come easily. Emma lay awake staring at the ceiling. Questions filled her mind. Questions about Ryan. Questions about Alexander. Questions about the future she suddenly could not predict. Eventually she climbed out of bed and walked downstairs for a glass of water. The guest house was quiet. Moonlight filtered through large windows as the storm finally drifted away. As she entered the kitchen, she froze. Someone else was there. Alexander stood near the counter holding a coffee mug. He looked surprised to see her. Could not sleep, he asked. Emma gave a tired smile. Not really. Alexander nodded as though he understood completely. Some nights are like that. For a moment neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. Emma found herself studying him. Under the softer lighting he appeared less intimidating than before. Less like a billionaire known by millions. More like a man carrying his own burdens. Thank you, she said quietly. Alexander looked up. For what? For helping me tonight. His expression softened. You do not owe me gratitude, Emma. Most people would have driven away. Alexander set down his mug. Most people never forget the person who gave them hope when they had none. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. Before she could respond, a notification sounded from her phone. Both of them glanced toward the screen. Another message from Ryan had arrived. Emma reluctantly opened it. This time there was a photo attached. The moment she saw it, her stomach dropped. It was a picture of an old hospital document, one she had never seen before, and written across the top was a name that changed the entire situation. Alexander Reed. Emma felt the blood drain from her face as she stared at the image on her phone. Alexander noticed the sudden change in her expression immediately. "What is it?" he asked. For a moment she could not answer. Her eyes remained locked on the document. The hospital form looked old, nearly a decade old. Several sections were blurred, but one detail stood out clearly. Alexander Reed. Beneath his name was a date. The same week she had met him at the bus station 10 years earlier. "I do not understand," Emma whispered. Alexander stepped closer. "May I see it?" She hesitated before handing him the phone. The moment he looked at the image, something shifted in his expression. Not fear, not anger, recognition. He knew exactly what he was looking at. A long silence followed. Emma's heart pounded. "What is that document?" Alexander lowered the phone slowly. His jaw tightened. "Where did Ryan get this?" "I do not know." Another message arrived before either of them could continue. Emma opened it immediately. Ryan had sent a second text. "I found this in a box Sophia bought from an estate auction last month. There are more documents. We need to meet." Emma frowned. Nothing about the situation made sense. Why would an estate auction contain medical records connected to Alexander? More importantly, why was Ryan suddenly acting concerned after everything he had done? Alexander stared at the screen for several seconds before returning the phone. "You should not meet him alone." The seriousness in his voice caught her attention. "Why?" Alexander looked away briefly. It was the first time she had seen him appear uncertain. "Because there are parts of my past you do not know yet." Emma folded her arms. "Then tell me." Another long silence followed. Finally, Alexander exhaled slowly. 10 years ago, before my company succeeded, my family was involved in a legal dispute over an inheritance. Emma listened carefully. The situation became complicated. Certain records disappeared. Financial documents, medical documents, personal files. He paused. Someone spent years trying to bury parts of that history. Emma's confusion only deepened. "What does that have to do with me?" Alexander met her eyes. "That is what worries me." Before she could ask another question, Daniel entered the kitchen carrying a tablet. He looked surprised to find them both awake. Then he noticed Alexander's expression. "What happened?" Alexander handed him the phone. Daniel examined the image. His reaction was immediate. "This cannot be real." Emma's pulse quickened. "You know what it is too?" Daniel looked at Alexander before answering. "I know what it appears to be." "And what is that?" Daniel hesitated. Alexander gave a small nod. Daniel finally spoke. "If this document is authentic, it connects you to an event that happened 10 years ago." Emma stared at him. "What kind of event?" Daniel swallowed. "One that could explain why someone spent years searching for you." The room suddenly felt very quiet. Emma looked from Daniel to Alexander. Neither man appeared comfortable. Whatever secret they were hiding was much bigger than she had imagined. Then another message arrived from Ryan. This time it was not a text. It was an address, followed by 6 chilling words. "Come tomorrow if you want answers." Emma barely slept for the rest of the night. Every time she closed her eyes, new questions appeared. Why had Ryan suddenly become obsessed with documents connected to Alexander? Why did Daniel react so strongly to a single photograph? Most importantly, why did everyone seem to know pieces of a story that she had never heard? By sunrise, she was already dressed and standing near the window. The estate grounds looked peaceful beneath the morning light, but her thoughts were anything but calm. A few minutes later, a soft knock sounded at the door. Alexander entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you got about 2 hours of sleep," he said. Emma accepted the cup with a tired smile. "That obvious?" "Very." For a moment, neither mentioned Ryan or the documents. The quiet felt surprisingly comfortable. Then reality returned. Emma looked up. "I am going to that address." Alexander's expression remained unreadable. "I expected you would. Are you coming?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the window. "There was a time when I spent years searching for answers. Sometimes the truth helped. Sometimes it made things worse." Emma studied him carefully. "That is not really an answer." A faint smile appeared. Then yes, I am coming. 2 hours later, a black SUV pulled into a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. The address Ryan had sent led to a small storage facility. Emma frowned as they parked. This is where he wanted us to meet. Daniel glanced at the building. Apparently, they entered the office and spoke with the manager. Within minutes, they were standing in front of a storage unit near the back of the property. Ryan was already there. He looked exhausted. His clothes were wrinkled. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes. The confident man who had thrown Emma out of his life seemed to have vanished overnight. When he saw her, relief flashed across his face. Emma. She remained several feet away. What is so important? Ryan looked toward Alexander. Tension instantly filled the air. I did not expect him to come. Alexander's voice remained calm. You asked for answers. Start talking. Ryan swallowed. Then he unlocked the storage unit. Inside were several cardboard boxes stacked against the wall. He pulled one forward and opened it. Old folders filled the container. Newspaper clippings, financial records, photographs, legal documents. Emma stared at the collection in confusion. What is all this? Ryan picked up a newspaper clipping and handed it to her. The article was dated 10 years earlier. Her eyes widened as she read the headline. It described a major legal battle involving the Reed family. But that was not what shocked her. Attached beside the article was a photograph. A photograph of a teenage girl leaving a bus station. Emma's heart stopped. It was her. Ryan looked directly at Alexander. Someone spent years tracking her before you found her. Silence filled the storage unit. Then Ryan revealed the final document. And according to these records, Emma was never a random stranger in your story. Emma stared at Ryan in disbelief. What are you talking about? Ryan pulled another folder from the box with shaking hands. I did not believe it either at first. He handed the papers to her. Emma quickly scanned the documents. Most of the legal language made little sense, but one detail appeared again and again. Her name. Not directly. A reference to an unidentified witness. A teenage girl present at a critical moment during the Reed family dispute. Emma looked up. This cannot be me. It is, Alexander said quietly. The storage unit fell silent. Emma turned toward him. For the first time since they had reunited, he no longer looked willing to hide the truth. Alexander stepped forward. 10 years ago, when you met me at that bus station, you were not simply helping a stranger. Earlier that day, you witnessed a conversation involving people connected to my family's legal battle. Emma searched her memory. Fragments began returning. Men arguing near a parking lot. A dropped folder. Someone leaving in a hurry. At the time, she had paid little attention. She had been more concerned about catching her bus home. I remember pieces of it, she admitted. Alexander nodded. Those pieces became important later. Investigators spent years trying to identify everyone who had been there. Emma looked down at the documents again. Suddenly everything made sense. The search, the records, the photographs. You were not looking for me because of the coffee, she said softly. Not entirely. Alexander's expression grew warmer. The investigation gave me a reason to search. What happened afterward gave me a reason not to stop. Ryan lowered his eyes. Regret filled his face. When Sophia found these boxes at the auction, we thought they might be valuable. Then I saw Emma's picture. He swallowed hard. That is when I realized there was a lot I did not understand. Emma studied him for a long moment. Just days earlier, she would have done anything to save their marriage. Now she felt strangely calm. The pain remained, but something had changed. She no longer needed his approval. She no longer needed him to choose her. Alexander had reminded her of something important. Her value had never depended on another person's decision. Daniel stepped forward and reviewed several documents. A few minutes later, he looked at Alexander and smiled. The case is officially closed. These records do not change anything legally. Relief spread across Alexander's face. A weight he had carried for years finally seemed to lift. Emma felt herself smiling too. For the first time since that terrible night, the future no longer looked frightening. It looked open, full of possibilities. As they left the storage facility, sunlight broke through the clouds. Outside, Alexander paused beside the SUV. Emma. She turned toward him. Yes. His eyes held the same sincerity she had seen on the night they first met. You once told me that one bad chapter does not mean the story is over. Emma laughed softly. I cannot believe you still remember that. I remember every word. For a moment neither spoke. Then Emma looked up at the clear sky. The storm was finally gone. not just the one outside, the one inside her heart as well. And as she stood beside the man whose life she had changed years ago, she realized something remarkable. Sometimes losing the future you planned is the first step toward finding the future you were